Nagranie.
Let's
start.
Good morning.
Morning.
Everyone. I have a pleasure to open today's second seminar on international relations. A seminar that is dedicated to discuss the main issues of international affairs, international relations, from both theoretical and empirical perspective. The first seminar we had 3 weeks ago was dedicated to discuss the issues of methodological and theoretical stance of the discipline. Our guests were the professors of international relations from Poland, and today we've got the pleasure to discuss some more empirical, everyday international politics that takes place in Europe, actually in the post-Soviet region, with our honorable guests from abroad, from Romania, from Babes-Bolyai University in Cluj, Napoca in Romania. Please welcome them with honor. We are happy that you came. Thank you for the fabulous cooperation we have since 5 years, I think, from as I can remember. We've got an agreement of cooperation between our universities, so institutionally we do work according to the international and bilateral agreements. So it is a huge honor that Babes-Bolyai University and especially Faculty of European Studies in Cluj is our close partner, and that we always can cope with you on scientific level and education and didactic issues as well. So, dear guests, please be welcome at our university. Thank you for coming, thank you for accepting our invitation. Let me introduce our honorable guests.
Another guest.
Yes, I know that another guest is with us as well. On my far right is Professor Adrian-Gabriel, the Dean of the Faculty of European Studies from Babes-Bolyai University in Cluj-Napoca in Romania. He's a professor at the faculty specializing in EU enlargement, notably to the Western Balkans and Eastern Europe issues. So this is his main domain of scientific interests. As I've mentioned, he's the Dean of the Faculty of European Studies, and he's also active in the areas of EU project management and communication, mainly with the European Commission. And he's also co-editor-in-chief of Seminariów International Journal. If anything that is missing, I'm sorry. And if anything added, maybe later in the introduction you will have the opportunity to briefly say a little bit more about your research that you are conducting at your unit. We will be delighted to hear about it. Our second guest is lecturer Dr. Dorin Dobra, also from the Faculty of European Studies, Babes-Bolyai University in Cluj, Napoca in Romania. His academic activity is dedicated to the topic of international relations, and also he has got a very practical experience at the issues that we are going to discuss today, as he was active in politics, in Romanian politics as a senator. He was actively in legislature 2020, 2016. He had a position of senator in Romania, so this political insight into the issues and some experience, the observation from outside the academia will be very profitable to our today's discussion. So, Dr. Dorin Dobra, welcome today. And of course, if you would like to share with us your academic interest, academic research you are conducting at your unit, we will be delighted as well. And the third speaker that is with us online today is our lecturer, Dr. Piotr Sieniawski. He's working at the Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński University. He holds a degree in law and international relations and PhD in political science. He's an alumnus of the Hague Academy of International Law and participant in numerous courses in international law and EU law. He visited many universities. For the moment he's in Georgia, and that's why he's with us, not in person but online. He's having his visiting professor position right now in Georgia, in Tbilisi, and I hope Dr. Sieniawski will be able to share with you some insights from Georgia as well, a country that was in the sphere of your scientific interest. Dr. Sieniawski prepared a book that was released this year at our university's publishing house, de facto states in post-Soviet region, and we're gonna discuss a little bit about some insights that you've got from your service dedicated to the topic of post-Soviet region as such. After the presentation, let me introduce and let me say a few words of introduction in the topic. The current conflicts in the post-Soviet space emerged in the last years of Soviet Union and the years that follow its demise since 1991, when the Soviet Empire collapsed, when the era of domination between two superpowers officially ended, opened a new era in international relations and interstate relations in Europe, especially among the states that were under the domination of Soviet Empire. The relatively recent conflict in Ukraine has brought another perspective to these conflicts. Although these conflicts are often referred to as frozen ones, as we know from the language of international relations that this sphere, this part of Europe is full of so-called frozen conflicts between states, the past 10 years have shown that armed violence has continued and sometimes escalated, even escalated. The first moment of this visible breakthrough or even escalation of the conflicts, interstate conflicts at that region was 2008, when Russian-Georgia war and subsequent developments in Abkhazia and South Ossetia happened. Also, the intensification of fighting around Nagorno-Karabakh in 2016 and new potentially conflict in eastern Ukraine indicated that these conflicts around sovereignty, ethnicity and borders in the post-Soviet space are far from over. And that's why we have invited our guests to discuss a little bit about the genesis, nature, specificity and possible prospects for settlement these conflicts. May I ask you, our speakers, I'm referring to our speakers, when looking from the nature of international relations, it is possible to say that the conflict is something that we cannot avoid when speaking like realist or neorealist do, using their language, that conflict is something impossible to skip in the relations between countries. Is it possible that countries cooperate in a peaceful manner? And the second question, is it possible that in the post-Soviet region this period of non-conflict situation is possible? How could you explain that? How could you refer to that hypothesis that we can deal with no conflict between states even in the post-Soviet region? Is it possible when looking at the situations that we are witnessing in that part of Europe? Professor Corpădean, please take the floor.
Great, thank you very much, Anya, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for joining us on today's event. So I think having lived a little bit through the post-communism era in a very peculiar part of Europe, I think it is very much possible to live without conflict, and the history of the European Union has, and the European construction process has pretty much revealed that it is possible to avoid conflict by placing things in common, by placing policies in common. However, our region has been tailored by the Soviet Union and by the Russian Federation afterwards in such a way that these conflicts appear to be unavoidable. And many of the regions with which we are intensely working are exposed to these conflicts in as artificial a manner as possible, if you consider what was behind the architecture prompting these conflicts, to the extent that we have been led to believe that they're an inherent part of our Europe. So there are many feelings that are running rampant in our part of Europe. That is very clear. There is a lot of nostalgia. There is a lot of artificially created hatred, and there are many feelings that appear around electoral time, for example, to the extent that we also have young people such as yourselves that have very peculiar feelings about and dreams about their greater countries. I have friends in Transylvania where there are a lot of Hungarians. I have a lot of Hungarian friends. Hungarian is actually an official language of my university, together with Romanian and German. So we have friends that live with a map of Greater Hungary on their bedposts, right? I have friends who dream of Greater Albania. I also have friends who dream of Greater Romania, and I think this is very, very dangerous. I dream of nothing greater than what we have right now. I think it's very, very worrying if you start to have these peculiar, historically infused illusions where you have more territory that you're disputing from other countries. But we all know that there is a certain geopolitical actor that has made a point of stirring these waters, and it's still doing so. When the Russian war of aggression started in February 2022, we were also given a boost by the nationalists, to dream once again of certain parts of Romania in the interwar period that were lost. You know that the interwar period was a very peculiar time for our region. We have nations that have experienced very traumatizing events like the Trianon treaties for Hungary, lost an immense portion of its territory and population. Romania was very much, well, on the winning side after the First World War, and the territory was greatly enhanced, greatly improved. So we still have a lot of nostalgia, like people who didn't live through those days, which is a psychological impossibility to be nostalgic for something that you haven't lived through. We also have young people such as yourselves that very rarely declare themselves to be communist nostalgics, but they've never experienced communism, of course, and they probably wouldn't live to see communism for 2 or 3 days. So I think that all of these conflicts have been very skillfully created in the region by Russia, by the former Soviet Union, of course, in order to keep certain areas at bay. And now, for example, because the Romanian-Moldovan relations are really a key focus of our foreign policy, I think this has been a very ample opportunity for everybody in Romania to see the depth of these conflicts. So it is avoidable with wisdom to have conflict in the region, and with the idea that perhaps there is a certain higher goal that can transcend the idea of conflict. And for Romania, for the mainstream politicians and political parties, and for us in academia who sometimes have reasoning, the idea is to prompt a form of regional integration. Actually, European integration is very much at hand right now, with Moldova being a candidate country, in order to overcome the historical conflict appetite of the region. And I think this is very much valid for all the other countries that have aspirations to decide upon their own foreign policy. Ukraine wanted to decide upon its foreign policy and to head towards a military alliance. It is a sovereign state, it has every right to do so. So we can see that when this healthy attitude towards the beginning of something new and towards the avoidance of conflict appears, Russia takes a very aggressive stance. Romania has lived under the constant threat and declarative threat of the Russian Federation for many years now. Putin has been bragging about how long it will take him to get to Bucharest and to Warsaw.
Yes, as well.
Right. And I think that this is something to be understood, taken with a grain of salt in our country, because if one belongs to very important alliances, then it is very obvious that the conflicts can be overcome and that war is avoidable in our region. So I don't want to have an attack of Europhilia right now, but I do believe that for Romania it was the only chance to avoid a future conflict.
Thank you, Professor. We will have the opportunity to ask some questions after the presentations of our speakers, so allow me to leave my question after the session of for panelists. So, Dr. Dobra, would you like to put some insights from your side to the issue at stake?
No, at least for the moment, for the grade of debate we've got here, I wanted our students to see that our world is a melted, wonderful place made by ethnicities and cultures. So when you look at the countries around Russia, it's not so hard to see that all the countries they want to control have already some conflicts cultivated, let me say it, cultivated for years now. So is this the moment we have to deal with this? It's the example of Ukraine, the starting example of making clearance in this situation. Let's hope for it. But at least it's not so hard to imagine that it's not even so hard to cultivate some nationalistic minorities feelings in such countries which are now looking for their own security and stability, to undermine, to put on the pressure all the time the state power, even democratic elected, only to cultivate instability, insecurity, and so on. So we have to look a little in the history, even that now we will try to go deeper and solve all these situations. You know, it's not an easy job to do, but it looks like at least we reached the moment we have to start it, we have to deal it honorably, seriously, we have to deal with all of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Piotr Sieniawski, would you like to take the floor and share with us some ideas from your point of view?
As you probably all know, Georgia has been going through a tumultuous time recently. But when it comes to the situation, because we were talking about the disruption of the Soviet Union back in the end of the 1980s and the beginning of the 1990s, so of course when we are talking about the post-Soviet space, there were conflicting interests.
Georgia is distant.
You know that song, isn't it?
COVID-19 deja vu. Yeah, COVID.
About Georgia, there are two of these conflicts, separatist conflicts in Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Both of them were preceded by an armed conflict, and then there was a ceasefire. And there was also the third conflict in the South Caucasus in Nagorno-Karabakh, which has been resolved by the parent state in a way that the parent state was able to reinstate its territorial integrity. So when we are talking back to the question whether conflicts are avoidable. This is not such an easy question because especially here in these conflicts, these are not just conflicts between a separatist entity and a parent state in terms of Abkhazia and Georgia or South Ossetia and Georgia, but there is also the third state involved, the
Frozen. Maybe.
one with the internet.
Yes, we've got some.
Maybe Russians.
We've got some problems with the internet connection. Let us proceed, I hope.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but the transfer is very low, and the quality of our...
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please continue.
Okay. Where was the disruption? I mean, from which point?
That the Russia
because there was some kind of issue.
That the Russia is the...
Yes. Okay, so. Okay, so yeah, there is the third actor that is involved in these conflicts, which of course creates an obstacle for the reconciliation. So and after 2008, there was actually a sort of shift of the perception of these conflicts, that there is actually conflict between Georgia and the Russian Federation regarding these conflicts. So I tend to believe that a lot will depend also on the results of the war in Ukraine, and what kind of position the Russian Federation will hold in terms of resolving these conflicts, because they were to a high extent used as a sort of buffer zone of the Russian Federation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sieniawski, for your presentation. In your book, you are using a very interesting stance, very interesting definition, de facto states in post-Soviet region. Could you please clarify, what do you mean? What is the scientific value of the definition you bring in your book? Could you please explain a little bit?
Yes, of course. Thank you for this question. Actually, I would like to show you the book that I recently published about de facto states. So actually, I claim that a de facto state is a geopolitical unit that has been created by the process of secession. Secession is a mode of state creation in international law, and so this is the first element, that that de facto state has been created by the process of secession. Professor Zenderovsky just joined me. He finished his lecture. So first of all, the process of secession, which means unilateral withdrawal of a part of the territory of a parent state against the will of the state. So there is no consensus on the withdrawal of the part of the territory. And of course, from the point of view of international law, this territory is still perceived as an inherent part of the parent state. So this is the first element of the definition of de facto state. The second element is that this territorial unit claims be a state. However, there's a different perception when it comes to the international community, especially that this de facto state has not been recognized either by any state at all, as it is in the case of Transnistria, for instance, or it has been recognized just by a few United Nations member states. This is actually the case of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, that they have been recognized by the Russian Federation and also by those states that maintain very close relations with the Russian Federation. And also this de facto state is able to provide basic services to its population to some extent, so that to some extent this de facto state is able to resemble a state. So this is actually the perception of a de facto state, that it claims to be a state, but of course the perception of the international community and of course perception of the international law is very different, because from the point of view of international law, these units are perceived as inherent part of their parent state. So this is the definition of de facto state that I presented in my research.
Okay, thank you. So, as far as I understand, you are talking about the states that are gain their some kind of independence from the existing state, but are not fully recognized by the international community, only by some members of the international community. Mainly in the cases that you've been looking at, we are talking about Russian Federation that recognized their independence. Yeah. So this is the case we are talking about. Why am I asking? Because when using this label, de facto state, is it possible to describe somehow the casus of Kosovo in the international relations, or this is something different from your point of view? How would you comment that? How can we think about the de facto states? Are these only the pro-Russian states in the region, or in general this is a notion, this is a label that could be referred to other countries in the international system?
Yes, thank you for your question. Actually, there is one more element of the definition which I would like to highlight, and this is the issue that these de facto states are able to exercise effective control over a part of the territory that they claim that this is their territory. For instance, in the case of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, we have had decisions by the European Court of Human Rights, which said that the Russian Federation is the power that is the occupying power, actually, that exercises effective control, and this has also been stated in the case of Transnistria, in the case of Ilashkund and others against Russia and Moldova. But back to your question about Kosovo. Actually, when we are looking at, because we always have to take a look on the reaction of the international community towards the claims about statehood. So, in case of Kosovo had been recognized in 2018 by 117 states. But then actually Serbia applied the policy in which Serbia managed to persuade other states to withdraw their recognitions. So at this very moment we have around 100 recognitions, or even below 100 of recognitions for Kosovo. So in terms of Kosovo, I would say that it is not just the de facto state, because of course some states do not recognize the independence of Kosovo, and within the European Union we even have 5 states which do not recognize the independence of Kosovo, which are Slovakia, Romania, Cyprus, Spain, and there is one more. Sorry?
Belgium and Greece.
No. Spain, Slovakia, Cyprus, Greece, and Romania. Okay, so we still have some states within the European Union which do not recognize the independence of Kosovo, but there is a broad, I would say that 100 countries, which is like around half of the member states in the United Nations, have recognized the independence of Kosovo. By the way, this is always not just a purely legal question, right? Because in international law we do not even have some kind of binding definition of what the state is, but it's always a political decision of a state whether a state does recognize or doesn't recognize some kind of entity that it is a state. But in case of Kosovo, taking into consideration wide recognition in the international community, I would say that it is, I would call it a state in statu nascendi, which means that it is a state in the process of creation. So this is not just a de facto state, because de facto state would mean that there is a very low number of recognitions, or that there is no recognition at all. So I would claim that Kosovo is a little bit different case, bearing in mind the quite broad recognition by other members of the international community.
Okay, Dr. Sieniawski, thank you very much for the clarification. You've mentioned about the other examples of the conflicts and problems in the post-Soviet region. We've got the guest from Romania, the country that is dealing with the Moldovan case. Professor Corpădean, could you, and referring to your first speech, as you've mentioned, about general ideas that you bring to us, you've mentioned about the European integration as a factor, as a process that helps to bring peace in our part of Europe. Is it valid to perceive in general European integration as something that is truly bringing a peace in the region, as we've witnessed that the Europeanization process in Ukraine, the process of closing the relations with the Europe for the countries of the region of Central and post-Soviet region, were the causes of problems when it comes to their relations with Russia. How could you explain, how can we perceive the process of Europeanization as a peaceful project, and how to avoid problems with Russia at that point? It is the case of Moldova, it is the case of Georgia as well.
Well, the process of European integration obviously involves only peaceful mechanisms. The fact that countries are not allowed by the Russian Federation to choose upon their own destiny is something completely different. So when the pro-European revolutions happened in Moldova and in Ukraine, it was a matter of choice, it was a matter of foreign policy choice, it was a matter of a mandate given by the people through free election to their own government in order to choose the path of an association agreement, for example, with the European Union, or in the case of a military alliance, closeness with NATO, because we all know that With certain notable exceptions, the custom in the region has been, according to the pyramid of needs, first of all to get as close as possible to the security realm by means of NATO, and then of course to seek prosperity and all the policies that are part of the European Union's acquis. In the case of Romania, for example, which across its tumultuous years of transition, there were very few political commitments that were kept by our beloved politicians. One of these was definitely the fact that NATO had to get the upper hand, had to be a priority in order to first of all secure the country and then make its way towards the benefits and the fruits of European integration, if you will. So the process itself does not involve, even NATO integration does not involve anything that would normally jeopardize the stability, the security of a region, provided that the countries in those particular regions or in our region were allowed the freedom of choice in terms of foreign policy, in terms of choosing upon their own destiny. Russia did not get directly involved in Moldova when Moldova, for example, elected a pro-European administration, which is quite frail, but a very competent administration, by the way, in terms of foreign policy. But it did stir the waters in a way that is quite typical of Russia, with the help of manipulation, with the help of sponsoring the opposition, with the help of creating as much of a mess as possible in domestic policy in order for the government to lose support of the already very shaky, let's say, portion of the population that is oscillating between East and West. So when Romania, for example, made the choice, there was very little threat to its security per se. But when Moldova is making the choice right now, the things are completely different. Because indeed, while Romania kept, with all of its wrongs, and there were many of them in the 1990s and even at the beginning of the 2000s, Romania kept its pro-European track, Moldova did not do the same. Unfortunately, as far as I'm concerned, Moldova oscillated between East and West. Ukraine did the same. And it's very interesting if you study Romanian-Ukrainian relations to see how much of a shift we're talking about on both accounts. For example, Romania and Ukraine enjoyed very, very poor neighborly relations throughout our history. There are so many files that were pushed artificially by the USSR and by the Russian Federation in order to create controversy and animosity between the two neighboring countries. Some of them belong to the old historical files, like the northern part of Bukovina. Others refer to the much more stringent needs of the national minorities. What kind of rights does Romania grant to the Ukrainians living on Romanian territory? And I would be very pleased to say that quite a lot. There's always room for improvement when it comes to minorities' rights, but Romania does provide education in Ukrainian. It provides ex officio representation in the Romanian House of Deputies for Ukrainian minority and for all the national minorities. The dual citizenship is accepted, and now with the war of aggression of Russia, the borders have been opened, and there is genuinely a lot of support towards Ukraine, including places at universities for young people such as yourselves, in order to be able to pursue their studies and so on. So this is good, but this is also normal. In the past, unfortunately, it wasn't like that. With the Bystroy Canal, with the Kryvyi Rih is Russian Kryvyi Rih industry that was shared between Romania and Ukraine, with the Snake Island, which became popular for a certain line that was said by the Ukrainian defenders. Can't say it here, but we all know what Snake Island is famous for the bravery of the Ukrainians that defended it. So all of these were among the files that Russia made a point of throwing into Romania's face, and Romanians sometimes took the bait, because unfortunately this is what happened. On the other hand, when Ukraine had Viktor Yanukovych as its president, in the official military doctrine of Ukraine, it was written that if there's a public document, if there is to be an attack against Ukrainian sovereignty, it would most likely come from Romania. Okay? Things have changed. Unfortunately, they've changed under the worst of circumstances, but the mutual knowledge between Romania and Ukraine, because between Romania and Moldova there was already plenty of mutual knowledge, but the mutual knowledge gained between Romania and Ukraine, the friendship that has been gained, is, I think, a major step for the future of the region and for the future of peace in the region. So no, EU integration has very little to do with conflict management unless there is a third actor that makes it about that. And it can do so in the open, such as the attack against Ukrainian sovereignty in 2022, or it can do so with the help of the usual Russian mechanisms, such as sabotage such as stirring the waters in occupied Transnistria with the help of the Russian military there, or by sponsoring pro-Russian opposition parties, or by resorting to cyber warfare and all of the things that unfortunately Russia has accustomed us with. But European integration needs to remain a free choice, and so does NATO, by the way. Integration has to remain a free choice of any democratic country.
Thank you very much for this clarification. I think we all agree that European integration per se is a peaceful project that requires that the parties involved in the process has got their borders with their neighbors in a stable way, and that there are no disputes over the borders, over the minorities between states. But I think about something deeper. I think about the integration process as something that is provoking Russians to be more active in the region. In that sense, I was thinking about European process, European integration, and the European path that was chosen by the post-Soviet countries as something that is provoking Russians to be more active in the region. And Dr. Dorin, Dobra, you've mentioned about the historical heritage, about the historical balance in somehow that is very vivid in the region, in the relations between states. Professor Corpădean said something about divide et impera, that Russians had used to conduct their policy among the states of the region. Is it possible to overcome this heritage, this painful history, and to have a kind of line of positive communication between the states of the region to avoid conflict, to build a peace among them? Or this heritage is too strong to build a sense of community between them, peaceful community between them? How could you comment it? How do you see it from your perspective?
Yeah, dear students, beloved students, dear guests, let's say it that, and frankly, that in the end, it's about the collision, maybe the final collision between two models. You know, one is the Eastern one, which is saying, look, we want to defend your sovereignty, attacking yourself. You know? We want another type of freedom about Europe is wrong in their own view. And on the other side, you've got the other model, which, let me tell you, it is the harder way of exemplifying, showing it, and spreading it. Only because it takes time. You know? In a Russian way, it's more simpler. We come on you, upon you, take all your statements, directions, and we will show you the real freedom, our freedom. On the other model, we have only the power of example. Have a look, really, have a look. Make a simple, please, students, dearest, make a simple comparison between your country and Belarus. And look at the standards you have already and the standards they have. Still, the Russian example, the Russian influenced. You have only to go abroad, Romanian-Moldavian border, to go in the countryside and to see how the European integration brought us all those not only material benefits, but it's about an atmosphere of including the minorities as a rich thing, a rich component in our general atmosphere, not letting them building fancies, not giving them access. And this is, in the end, this is the differentiation between the two models. Now, let me say it. We've got some minority there. Let's use them in our way, in our interests. Let's raise them. Let's sustain them to fight for the rights. Which rights? Why haven't you got so many tensions in Europe about minority rights? Because it's another model of coming all together, living all together, cultivating your own traditions and models, but as a richness, not as a insecurity feeling all the time. Anya, we had faced such a surprise in 2015. I haven't told Adi even that when going from Romanian Senate as a European Integration Committee in Moldavia, the first thing that at that time the oppositional parties, the pro-European ones, told us it was a thing we haven't thought about it. It should be possible. Look, dear Romanians, you know that we haven't got still a national TV channel in Romanian? Still in Moldavia? How you wanna spread not Romanian culture, but European culture, European trends, European informations, European standards, European way of seeing life. Here, as long as we've got only Russian information channels. You know, that's the way you can work, not fight there. We don't have to fight there as the Russians when the two models collide. In the end, try to see this way. This war, it was the ultimate way of Putin to defend his model. Other way, you as a student, we as a teachers, even the Russian citizens going in the Europe, sending their children to study in Europe, buying property in Europe. With all of these, what Putin saw? That the European model is surrounding him, not in a war model, in a war pattern, but in a cultural and easy making atmosphere, which is based, let me say it, not on some compulsory sendings. It's only the citizen choice. And when he saw really that this model penetrated even Russia, what last thing he had to do? To create a big trouble in the light of his right to opinion, but it's the Russian right and the Russian way to do something.
Thank you, Dr. Dorin. Dobra, I think it is a very clear picture you've showed us that the war and the situation in post-Soviet region is, of course, are the problems of security, are the problems of interstate quarrels, and so on, but more and more it is a cultural fight, a kind of discursive fight between two models, two types of empires between European values and standards and a kind of Eastern civilization, if we may even call the way of behavior and the code of conduct that the administration of Putin has a kind of civilization. It is a kind of protection against European values, against our way of thinking, and that's why I think that this European model of living, of culture and so on is so threatening to Russians. They are afraid of it, and that's why, motivated by this sense of fear, they are trying to protect the last elements of their dignity as an empire, so that they are doing very bad decisions, very catastrophic decisions, geopolitical decisions that are devastating our societies, our culture and our states. Dr. Sieniawski, you are in Georgia, in the country that is interested in his European and Euro-Atlantic future. Do you see those tenses, these processes of fighting between two models, between East and West? How could you describe Georgian society, Georgian political elites when it comes to this division as an intellectual way of getting them know better? Could you please tell us a little bit about the Georgian society and the divisions that are among them? How do they live?
Yes. Thank you so much for the question. I just wanted to add that I very much agree with the previous speakers about the role of Europeanization, but I just wanted to add one point to this, that when we are talking about the Europeanization, this is not just the membership of the state in the European Union, the presence of the European Union. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please continue.
Okay, so it's not just membership in the European Union or the presence of the European Union, but also other elements such as, for instance, the OSCE, for example, or the membership within the Council of Europe that has made very significant decisions when it comes to the responsibility of the Russian Federation for its involvement in these conflicts. Just in this context, since Russian Federation has left the Council of Europe in 2022, we cannot exercise its responsibility within before the European Council for European Court for Human Rights anymore. But as you asked me a question about the attitudes towards the European Union and the NATO, so just according to the polls, there is a largely significant majority in the society that supports these integration tendencies. So it is very much around 90% of the society who support the integration process of Georgia to the European Union and also to NATO. And we have seen recently, probably everyone has seen the pictures from Tbilisi when the Georgian government adopted the so-called law on foreign agents, which means that an organization that receives 20% of financial support from abroad will be labeled as a foreign agent, which very much resembles the law that was adopted in the Russian Federation. So, of course, when we are looking from abroad, it very much looks like there is some sort of different attitude by the society and by the government, so that there is a sort of disbalance, saying that actually this is not this is very much simplified, of course, this perception that the society is very much pro-European and the government copies somehow the Russian legislation on foreign agents. Also, another big issue is for the EU, especially, is that those goods that were put on the sanction list are being smuggled through the countries of the South Caucasus. One of the most significant routes of smuggling actually pass through Georgia. So this picture is much more complicated than it looks like from our perspective. It is more like the government is trying to strengthen its position on the domestic level. So this is what has been happening in Georgia. But of course, the South Caucasus as such, not just Georgia, but also Armenia, Azerbaijan, they are very much they very much resemble the battlefield of the powers that actually compete for political power in the South Caucasus.
Okay, thank you. So do you assume that Georgia might be another country that will be somehow in the sphere of Soviet interest, just to stop their European ambitions? I mean, as you showed us, the division between society and political elites, that we might, that we should be aware that the Georgia might be the next country in Russians' interest and real actions towards the country?
Yes, well, actually, there has also been the process of normalization of relations between Georgia and the Russian Federation. It is also important to note that on the official level there are no diplomatic relations, because they have been cut off in 2008 when the Georgian-Russian war occurred. But of course, I would say that these conflicts that we were talking about, they are very much used by the Russian Federation in order to keep the countries affected by these conflicts in the orbit of the Russian Federation. So when we look on the process, the attempt for reconciliation, it is very much like that the Russian Federation increased its presence when the situation was going down the right path. and it has very strong presence in both Abkhazia and South Ossetia. For example, just an interesting fact is that the budget of de facto state South Ossetia consists of around 80% of direct budgetary aid from the Russian Federation. In case of Abkhazia, it is around 50 to 60%. So yes, these conflicts are very much used in order to keep Georgia in the orbit of the Russian Federation. Nevertheless, Georgia has been granted the candidate status in the European Union. Also, the population very much and very strongly supports the integration process. So. Well, I would be very optimistic when it comes to the society and their clear vision. There is, of course, different strategy adopted by the government. But yes, answering the question very briefly, it is something that is being used by the Russian Federation to a large extent.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Corpădean. From your perspective, from the perspective of your country. Could you please tell us a little bit about the Moldova case? How does it work when it comes to Moldova? Is it the same? Are these processes similar to those that takes place in the post-Soviet region? How is it going when it comes to the integration process when it comes to Moldova?
Right. That's really a tough question. I think Moldova has always been a very sensitive subject for Romania for a whole bunch of reasons. Some of which are historical, some of which are cultural, linguistic, and so on. So there have always been very special stakes, both at state level and at electoral level, and at the level of common citizens, of course. Moldova is a special case due to history. Romania has always tried to engage in this some sort of a reparatory compensation-like measures towards Moldova, because it's really a country to which history appears to have played a really nasty trick, with it being included in the Soviet Union, and then with this attachment of Transnistria at the very right moment by the Russians in order to create the perfect hotspot for Moldova to be stuck, to be blocked. And then, of course, we have a much more pragmatic approach. Romania is granting the EU citizenship, so the Romanian citizenship, to whomever proves that they had relatives holding Romanian citizenship in the interwar period in Moldova, and that's pretty much everybody. So this is a very important measure. It has added greatly to our society, I can tell you that much. There is a lot of human capital of very good quality that is coming from Moldova, but sometimes Romania is just a stepping stone towards maybe the West. Romania is under a formal obligation to protect its citizens wherever they may be, so this is very complicated because there is an ample proportion of the people residing on the territory of the Republic of Moldova who have the Romanian citizenship, including President Maia Sandu, who is a Romanian citizen. So it's very complicated because Moldova is no Ukraine. Moldova is a neutral country with precarious military capabilities and with a Russian military occupation in Transnistria. And the Russians in Transnistria are in a very tight spot because they can no longer refill, so to speak, either their human power or their military capabilities, since Ukraine has pretty much locked everything down. But the model is that Romania is trying to cooperate with Moldova in as constructive a way as possible. It was the first country that recognized Moldovan independence amid the breakup of the Soviet Union. It's a country that is giving ample financial assistance to Moldova, including in terms of energy, because unlike other countries in the region, Romania is not dependent on Russian energy, but Moldova was. So now Romania is actually trying to make a point of connecting the energy grids with Moldova so that Moldova can no longer face itself in the position of the Russians turning off the tap at the very right moment in the break of winter, for example, which they have the capability of doing and the habit of doing. And then in my opinion, any Romanian who understands the geopolitics of the region and the stakes of EU integration will also get the fact that even if there might be a dream of a greater Romania, of unity with Moldova, which is shared by a proportion of the Romanian population and of the Moldovan population, this is realistic within the European Union. This is a message, by the way, that I have been trying to convey to some other countries in the region that I'm working with, like Serbia. You know, Serbia and Kosovo reunited under the auspices of European Union. Don't try that. It's not going to work. But it will work on Romanians. It will work on conscientious Romanians who understand what the European Union is all about. So the only realistic step towards a common future is within the European Union, which is why Romania promotes the enlargement policy to a very large extent. When Romania held the rotational presidency of the Council, they promoted the enlargement policy to the Balkans. Romanians are very Euro-enthusiastic about anything, but especially about enlargement. So even Turkish membership benefits from a majority of Romanians, which is peculiar in Europe because it's very, very different from the trend. So there is a lot of assistance. Now Romania hasn't really made a package deal of Ukraine and Moldova, but de facto there is the idea of a package deal. So with the rediscovered relations between Romania and Ukraine, imagine that it would have been inconceivable to see Volodymyr Zelensky speak before the Romanian Houses of Parliament before the war. It would have been outrageous, right? But now it's a fact. And I think that Moldova and Ukraine can be made into a package deal because Romania has the wisdom to understand that it needs to support enlargement at a very high cost. It's a country that still needs a lot of resources from the European Union, and it's very clear that many of these resources will have to be channeled towards the reconstruction of Ukraine. But Romania can also be a hub, assisting amply in the reconstruction of Ukraine, which will bring a lot of benefits to Romania, not only in terms of image and foreign policy, but also in terms of pecuniary advantages. So Moldova is, I would say, the lucky collateral factor that has prompted Romania to join in this very, very strong commitment towards Ukraine. Needless to say, this is a truism, right? Everything depends upon the outcome of the war. Is Russia going to win? Is Russia going to lose? Is Russia going to lose? And how is it going to lose? Right? What is the definition of Russian defeat in Ukraine? This is something that we are very interested in, and it's the reason why Romania is contributing amply with weapons also, not as much as Poland perhaps, but to the whole regional effort and to the whole stability of the Black Sea region. So what else is there to say? There have been a few very thorny subjects that Romania has made a point of advocating. For example, the use of the Romanian language in Ukraine. The former pro-Russian administration would insist upon the existence of Moldovan language. Now I think I'm the opposite of any definition of a nationalist that you can think of. But because some of my studies are in the field of linguistics, I can pretty much say that there is no Moldovan language. Absolutely not. This is one of the most peculiar and scientifically ridiculous things that you could ever hear. But it was a point of, Russians prompting more secessionism or more complicated dialogue between Bucharest and Chisinau. And now one of the things that one of the red lines that Romanians have been able to get is the fact that there is indeed no more Moldovan language in use. The Declaration of Independence of Moldova clearly is the constitutional document, the first constitutional document, and it stipulates that Romanian is the language. Romania has also negotiated with Volodymyr Zelensky's government that there should be no more teaching in Moldovan because there are 400,000 Romanians living in Ukraine right now. That's a very sizable community. So it does have these regional interest, it does have these sensitive cultural aspects that it's cultivating, but overall, I think it's a very constructive policy towards enlargement, towards Ukraine, towards overcoming the former hurdles that Russia has been shoving down everybody's throats. And I think that, again, if the outcome of the war is favorable, Romania is likely to play a constructive role in the enlargement of the region.
Thanks. Thank you very much for the positive message. We do hope that the outcome of the war will end soon, and the aggressor will be punished according to international law, and that he will pay for the damages he made in Ukraine, but also damages he made within the international society when breaking the international norms of conduct, of the norms of international treaties as such. Thank you very much for that part of our seminar. I think it is the time for our professors and students to join us to the debate. If there are questions to the speakers, please feel free to raise your hand and to ask a question. We will be delighted to hearing from you. How do you see the processes of statehood conflicts, interstate conflicts in the post-Soviet region from the perspective that you've heard from the Romanian, Moldovan, Georgian perspective, and the Russian policy in the region. So feel free to raise your hand. Professor Kaczorowski, you can ask in Polish, I will help you to translate.
Dziękuję bardzo za interesujące wystąpienia, ale chciałbym, jestem znawcą tematyki, ale zajmuję się trochę teorią państwa i chciałbym zapytać się pana Sieniawskiego o to pojęcie, które jest tutaj w jego wypowiedziach tak często się pojawia, jest istotne. Państwo de facto. Z jednej strony bowiem nauka powinna być wrażliwa, że tak powiem, na rzeczywistość i rozpoznawać różne jej wymiary i aspekty. Zwłaszcza w rzeczywistości tak, no jednak w stosunku do innych nieokreślonej jak rzeczywistość polityczna, ale z drugiej strony używanie pojęć niesie ze sobą też różnego rodzaju konsekwencje. Więc wprowadzamy, jak rozumiem, obok pojęcia państwa, pojęcie państwa de facto. I teraz no, to po pierwsze sprawia, że pojawiają się wtedy dwa pojęcia państwa. Pojęcie państwa jest tradycyjne i jest ukształtowane i, że tak powiem, stabilne. Chociaż rzeczywiście mówiło się często o systemie politycznym zamiast państwa, mówiło się o tym, że demokracja to nie jest państwo, że to jest coś innego. Wszelako jednak ostatnio zauważalny jest powrót do pojęcia państwa. Po tych wszystkich różnych, tak powiem, kontrowersjach wokół niego pod koniec lat ubiegłego stulecia. Więc obok ustabilizowanego i mającego swoją tradycję pojęcia państwa pojawia się inne pojęcie państwa, państwa de facto. Czyli mamy dwa pojęcia i teraz można z tego dualizmu w różny sposób korzystać. Znaczy to rozchwianie, bo niewątpliwie tutaj dochodzi do jakiegoś rozchwiania pojęciowości, czy to rozchwianie nie jest niebezpieczne, czy że tak powiem pożytki z niego płynące są większe niż deficyty, niż niekorzyści. To po pierwsze.
I'm sorry, Professor. Dr. Sieniawski, can you hear the question? Because it is the question to you.
Yes, I heard some. I didn't hear the beginning, but then I heard the second part of the question. Yeah, so I understand that there is a question about the dual nature of the definition of the state, which Professor Kaczorowski asked.
I will give the microphone to Professor Kaczorowski so you can hear him better.
Shall I answer immediately, or
no, there's another
do
part.
Więc skrócę, prawda? I po pierwsze chodzi o to, że dokonuje się rozchwianie. Wprowadza się drugie pojęcie, są dwa pojęcia, państwo de facto, państwo. I czy to rozchwianie jest potrzebne, czy to rozchwianie jest korzystne. Po drugie, o co tutaj chodzi? Państwo de facto. No co tu jest de facto w odniesieniu do państwa de facto? No, skądinąd mówi się, że fakty są jednoznaczne. Fakty jeśli są, to są. I one są rozstrzygające. A tutaj okazuje się, że one nie są rozstrzygające, ponieważ w odniesieniu do tych państw wiele państw ze społeczności międzynarodowej ich nie uznaje. Gdyby tu powoływały się państwa de facto na fakty, to dżentelmeni w sprawach faktów nie dyskutują, prawda? To powinno czynić je jednoznaczne. a nie czyni, prawda? A nie czyni. To pojęcie wprowadza się dlatego, że owa faktyczność istnienia państwa nie jest dla wszystkich oczywista. Więc i pojęcie faktyczności, faktów, tutaj też zaczyna być takie rozchwiane, bo okazuje się, że fakty, ale zależy dla kogo fakty, prawda? No więc właśnie, takie kontrowersje wokół tego, czy takie wątpliwości wokół tego pojęcia mi się nasuwają. I jeszcze jedna kwestia, tutaj, jeżeli w nauce zacznie się pojawiać pojęcie państwo de facto, to czy w sposób niezamierzony może nauka nie zyskuje politycznego znaczenia, bo, że tak powiem, uprawomacnia coś, co nie dla wszystkich jest prawomocne. No, to może już wystarczy.
Dr. Sieniawski, would you like to respond to the question directly?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. It is indeed very crucial for defining what we conduct research on. The problem is that first of all, there is no definition, no binding definition of a state in international law. Actually, just the science of international law, the doctrine of international law says that we have four basic elements, which are territory, population, effective government, and the fourth element, which was added actually in 1933 Montevideo Convention, which was a regional convention in Latin America, and then became part of the international custom. The fourth element was the capacity to enter into international relations. Very often students, but also scientists, confuse it with recognition. It's not recognition because recognition is a political act. The fourth element is the capacity of an entity to enter into international relations. But what do we do if an entity is able to enter into international relations, so that we can say that, okay, this entity has this capacity, but what if other members of the international community are not interested in having some kind of international relations with this entity? So now, how do we assess this last four criterion? So this is very much problematic. So that's why it's hard to say whether an entity is a state or is not. Actually, we have these four criteria in order to assess whether it is a state or not, and then we have another perception based on the recognition, which is largely political and not a legal based question. And as for the question about the de facto state definition, so why we refer to an entity as de facto, because very often these territories are perceived by the parent state as occupied territories, and this is also the case of when we were talking about Abkhazia, South Ossetia, but also Transnistria, that these are the territories which are under the temporary occupation by the Russian Federation. So we do not want to call them states because in this way we would assume that the territories which are occupied by a different power, that they are states. So this is the term de facto state is some kind of reconciliation between legal perception and also the political perception. Also, we often have the term failed state, right? But this is also very much confusing, right? Because if a state fails, then the state doesn't exist anymore, right? So something like failed state is actually also, when we are talking from the point of view of international law, it's legal nonsense, because in such a case there would be no state at all. But we have a presumption that even if the state does not temporarily fulfill one of the criteria according to Montevideo Convention, we still assume, or if a state is under temporary occupation, we still assume that it is the state. So this is the way actually how to reconcile this legal and political perception.
Thank you, Dr. Sieniawski. I think that the question asked by Professor Kaczorowski reveals a division between definitions that comes from two disciplines, political science and political theory, that was bring and that was very common. I mean, the notion, the state, since 19th century, and international relations that are more flexible, more open to many variants of the same definition. So at the level of meta theory, we can see that political science and international relations has a different way of definition of the same elements. But when I was listening the reply that Dr. Sieniawski gave us, I think that we can even say so-called states, just to underline that these are not the same states as Poland, United States, I don't know, that these are so-called states, that they do call themselves states. Yeah, so the facto state is something might be perceived as something dangerous, especially in this post-Soviet region, that gives legitimacy of autonomous and disintegration movements in the region, and maybe this so-called states is something more safe to use. I don't know how to refer to that.
Actually, in political texts, we have also other terms, not just de facto state, but also quasi-states, states within states. So these are all the terms, or de facto regimes, also in international law. So, or contested states, right? Because they claim that they are states, but their statehood is contested. So these are all the terms that describe these issues. But in my opinion, the notion de facto states describes very well that they resemble states, that they actually possess the criteria of statehood, but for certain reasons we do not want to refer to them as states.
It also reveals your commitment to international law, the de facto, de jure, and so on. Those are sentences used by international lawyers, and maybe this is why you've got this possibility and this kind of thinking about the processes that for the people who are strictly international relations scholars or political scientists, very sometimes hard to accept. Yeah, but I can imagine that your second education, your diploma in international law, is the way that in somehow facilitated you this work on de facto states and bring you close to this language that is very close to the international law as well. Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions to our speakers, to our panelists? our students. I hope that you've enjoyed our discussion, that you've had this opportunity to listen and to learn about the facts, and also that you've learned about the academic dispute that is possible between us, that we can have a different way of seeing some issues, but at the end we can discuss it in a very peaceful and academic manner. So thank you very much for your presence, dear speakers. Thank you very much for your coming. It is one more time, let me repeat it, a pleasure for us to have you here. For me it was an intellectual fabulous possibility to reflect some issues, to think about something deeper, and the things we've been discussing are truly inspiring to conduct further research. So thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Sieniawski, for being with us. All the best during your journey into Georgia, and I hope we will meet each other in few months during the third seminar on international relations. Thank you very much and all the best.
Thank you so much, and best wishes from Georgia. Best regards to Warsaw.